Hey, we're back here on the show, and I'm very sorry to disappoint people. I know I said we were going to go to the white trash update, but George Carlin is here.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's the same thing.
I've really disappointed the listeners.
I hope not. Anyway, we'll get to the white trash update later.
We do a white trash update because
Yes.
Kate comes from a white trash family.
Do you?
Yeah, in case anyone's curious, my brother is still a hooker.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
yeah.
Where did they originate?
Near Tampa, Florida.
And what kind of a thing?
In, what kind of a thing? What kind of a swamp did they come from, right?
I just wondered if it was trailer
Yeah,
trash.
it's like a double wide.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good, a lot of room to move around.
Her brother also doesn't have teeth, and he's a hooker, too.
That's the first requirement. That's good for a hooker.
And her sister's a stripper.
Coming.
They are.
So we check up on what they do every week.
Another fine family.
Yeah. Thank you for coming and doing the show.
Sure.
I can't believe you're here, first
I
of all.
can't either.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad to. I'm happy to. I wanted to do the thing I promised you I would do.
Thank you.
So this is nice. I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
It's a pleasure to have you. You're working on your new HBO special, right?
Well, I'm doing it March 1st. It's called It's Bad For You. And it's live from Santa Rosa, California. It'll be the 14th one I've done since 77, 30 years of doing them. So I'm very happy with it. It's probably the best one yet. I really think the stuff is... It's got the most cohesive feel. It's got a kind of an overall theme without being stated that's there.
Right.
And I like that. So I'm very happy about it.
What kind of things does this one cover?
Well, BS in America.
Okay, that's a popular theme.
The fact that from childhood through death, and all along the way, you're just surrounded by BS of all kinds, whether it's the government stroking you, or religion stroking you big time, or big business stroking you, or the strokes of ordinary things we repeat all the time without thinking how full of crap they are.
Right.
And but the theme is it's called It's Bad For You because the longer thing I say a few times in the show to reestablish the theme, I say it's all BS, folks. It's all BS and it's bad for you because it is, you know. But I mean, it's true of any culture. There are a lot of things that aren't genuine, that are just part of the everyday belief system and part of what we accept and don't look at and don't question and don't examine and don't challenge. Right. And that's one of the problems, is that we don't challenge things in this country. No one is taught to question authority anymore.
I heard you talking about how you feel this country's going to fall, and I think you have a good point, because I always think about like the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire, the Byzantines.
Yeah.
They all thought they were the greatest, and they all went down.
They all overextend. They all overextend geographically. They all wind up employing mercenaries. If you heard that one lately, right? Yeah. Iraq. And there are a number of other factors which don't come to mind now because I haven't briefed myself on that. I read a little about that and I file it somewhere and it's not there when I need it. So I often look things up more recently to be more conversant with them. But there are at least 6 or 7 significant parallels between any empire, the Dutch, the Spanish Empire, the British Empire. They all overextended themselves.
I think we're following that pattern.
I think it's inevitable. And the other thing was that the barbarians are at the gate. You know, we refer to the Muslim fascist, so-called fascists, as these are the current people who really do not come from a similar type of civilization that are a threat, that are perceived as a threat to this civilization. So a lot of the pieces are in place, and it's inevitable anyway because this is a decadent place. I mean, you can now buy well, for instance, there are over 200 different forms of cat food. You can buy. There are like 400 different choices in mustards alone.
I have all of them.
I'm sure you do. But it's just, it's really a very trivial culture, and it deserves to die.
So who do you think?
It really does. For the evil we've done, the exploitation and theft of cultures, the theft of natural resources, the exploitation of black and brown people for centuries, just as the English did. They called it white man's burden. We called it manifest destiny. We stole this country. We wiped out 500 Indian cultures and religions in the process,
right.
And we then stole the remaining part from Mexico. We just took it. And so it's ours. Yeah, it's really a goofy place.
Yeah, but I think that all the other countries are so crappy that we still win.
I still would rather be here than anywhere else. I'll
exactly.
Tell you that. Yeah.
That's true. Other cultures, if you die, you go in other religions, you get closer to God, whatever. Yeah. If you die in Islam, you get 72 chicks. That's what it is. You get 72 virgins.
I've seen that disputed by Islamic scholars.
Right.
A lot of them don't agree with that.
Some say 40.
Some say the whole thing's just made up by the West.
Which I know you hate religion.
Well, hate is a really tough word because you have to actively live hate. And I don't hate anything, but I have a strong distaste. Excuse me while I fish out a Kleenex here.
Sure.
I have a strong distaste for what man has done to himself. You'll pardon the capital M, man. Yeah. But I use the language I was born into. Today's kids can call these things whatever they want, but it's capital M, man. We've always called humankind in the past. So the way we've given over ourselves to this invisible man in the sky, who has a list of things he doesn't want us to do. It's an absurdity. It's primitive.
Right.
It's on a par with worshiping rocks and the sun, and so it's absolutely a primitive.
Just so many people that die and kill in the name of religion.
Well, what about the modern religious people who say, but we can still say that God is science, that kind of whole argument thing, Well,
there are people who say, well, there's an organizing intelligence maybe in the universe, some sort of an organizing intelligence. Now, I used to call myself an atheist until I found out one or the other, that's kind of a belief too. And I don't really like to be stuck with a belief. So in the official listing of titles, I would probably fall under agnostic because I have no way of knowing the answer to any of these things, but I'm sure it's not a judgmental male figure who throws lightning bolts and puts you in a place of fire.
So it's not
and
Zeus.
Punishes you and keeps track of kids who are 9 years old, whether they're touching themselves or not. It's just an absurdity on its face.
That's Santa Claus, actually.
Santa does the touching, I see. Okay. Excuse me a second. I have what's called vasomotor rhinitis. Isn't that a nice name for a runny nose?
Yeah.
The doctor said basically your nose runs because it wants to, George.
It's a beautiful euphemism.
It's a better reason for blowing my nose than I used to have, and it's much less expensive.
When I learned about euphemisms in high school, my English teacher at the time said nobody can explain euphemisms better than George Carlin.
Wow.
So he played a tape of yours. That's the first time I ever heard you.
Wow.
And he played your bit about euphemisms. Don't thank me. He played it. I just listened.
Well, what's the teacher's name?
I forgot.
Thanks, Steve.
But I remembered you.
I wound up doing, like the last book that came out, I wound up doing about 60 pages on them, spread throughout the book, But
When will Jesus bring the pork chops?
Yeah, when will Jesus bring the pork chops, right? So anyway, euphemisms are all part of the lies that we live, ways of avoiding the truth, ways of blunting reality and not living with it, not being in it. I understand that the urge to do it. I understand the impulse, but things get overdone. Any good idea, any bad idea, we overdo it. Overdo everything.
Every time I interview you, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I just want to say every time I interview you, it's great because everybody calls me up. They say, you're interviewing George Carlin? That's great. You better make it a good interview because this could be the last opportunity you have. He's so old.
Yeah. I'm 70.
Yeah.
I'm 70, and I'm from a healthy line. My father died young with heart disease, which I inherited, but I inherited good medical care and its advances in science and good medicine, good care, and a little bit of wisdom about how to live. some years back. So I that's the only part of me that's ever broken down. I've never had troubles with my health. I've had heart disease, and I've had troubles from it and problems with it. But I now know how to manage it very well, and you can still, there are things that still can happen, but generally speaking, my health is good.
So what are there things you do to keep yourself, because you're one of the few comics that's had the longevity in your career, and so many others just haven't made it this far.
Well, I found out, I used to describe myself in interviews when I began. I used to say, well, I'm a comedian who writes his own material, because I was always proud of that, and I wanted to get that in, because a lot of people don't, and a lot of the ones who you would think do not buy material do. Mm-hmm. And it's shameful, because
Want to name some names?
And I wish I could. Yeah. But it's this job is about your own ideas. It's about what you think and feel, and you put out there in this comic form. But I found along the way that I became a writer, and what I think of myself now as is a writer who performs his own material, which is a seemingly simple switch, but it's profound. It was a profound thing to me to learn that I could write, that I really was a writer of these essays. Mm-hmm. And so I've been very, very, very lucky with the genetic package I got. People always say, what breaks did you get? The breaks I got were the genetic package I got, the DNA I got from my mother and father.
It's not just pure genetics. It's all,
They say it's hard work after that, but the tendency to want to work hard is genetic too. The ability to organize things and to want to organize them and to prepare yourself has, I'm sure, a genetic component to it. I mean, I can't swear to that, but it seems that almost everything has some genetic predisposition. There's a little bit of a lean there. Right. And granted, nurture and environment will foster these or squash them, depending on if you got the crap beat out of you by both parents for 10 years. A lot of things probably get killed. Only one. Yeah. Which one?
Right.
Dad.
Well, first off, here's the thing. Like, I was about to bring up Danny's dad. Danny's dad is fat, and he's got the genes of that. But his dad works really hard, and Danny is the laziest person on earth.
Got the mother's laziness gene.
Oh, his mother works too. All
right.
Everybody works hard.
Maybe they canceled each other out.
I'm not even working right now.
Everything things can skip a generation.
That's it.
Yeah.
Sometimes two rights make a wrong.
But how did he get the chunky gene, though?
Eggplant Parmesan.
George, how do you feel about when it comes down to the newer generation of comics?
I don't know enough about them to really sound intelligent about it. I don't seek out comics to see or to hear. It's the kind of thing all my life where you don't want to really hear what a comic is doing, because you're afraid that some of the stuff will get into your subconscious and will come out and you'll think it's your own, and you just really don't want to do that. And also, there are two things I found. There are two reactions I've had in the past when I was a younger comic. To someone telling me, oh, you ought to hear this guy, man. He's the new guy. He's hot, he's new, and he's just not like Sam Kinison was that when Sam came along. Right. There have been a couple of others, and I can't think of them. But there's one or two reactions I had when I would hear the guy in question. I would either say, oh, okay, no threat there. Yeah. Or I would say to myself, oh, I think I'll go home and work a little harder. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with Kinison. When I heard Kinison, I said, okay, I see. I have to raise my voice. Now, I didn't mean literally. Mm-hmm. What I meant was figuratively. You have to be heard, because this culture is becoming increasingly fragmented and noisy. There's a lot of din out there. You take the music field alone, it's hard to even know.
And the attention spans are getting much shorter.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you have to kind of find a way of writing and creating ideas and imagery and words and sentences and paragraphs that command attention, that leap out. Yeah. And so I just put that in. I didn't work on that every day, but I put that into my mix. I dropped that into my mix and said, okay, that's cool. I'll have to remember that. And I think a lot of it showed in those years post seeing Kinison, to where I raised my voice, sometimes literally, but mostly in a figurative sense.
When I interviewed Louis Black, he told me that you called him when you saw him on TV and told him that you loved what he was doing.
Right.
He said you called and said, I'm not going to help you.
Yeah, he's great. And he's another one who literal in the literal sense, knows how to raise his voice. But he's got a good mind. He's got a good analytical mind about events.
Do you want to take a phone call?
Sure.
All right, let's put
as long as there's someone that's calling in here.
Yeah, people call. Believe it or not.
Intercepting calls
from the other room.
And NEA is.
Yeah.
What is it?
The number is 646-312.
I don't even know my agency.
472-555-1182. That's not even the number. George is confusing people.
NSA, that's what I was thinking.
Last time we spoke, you told me that you feel, number one, you're a performer, but you're also an artist.
Yeah.
And that every artist is on a journey.
Yeah.
And you're on a journey, and that's what keeps you going, and that's how you write your material.
That was the other thing I found out.
No, go ahead.
Well, that was the other thing I found out along the way, is that besides being an entertainer, that was the distinction I made. Besides being an entertainer, which I knew I was and thought I was, and they call it, like performing arts and all that. But I mean, I never took that seriously. But a writer is an artist. A writer creates out of holes, out of nothing, from his observations and impressions of the world and things and sees and hears. So art is so what I found out is that I enjoy being known as a stand-up comic. I enjoy being the fact that I'm an entertainer, a performer. But I know there's an artist at work in there, and an artist is always dissatisfied. An artist is never satisfied with the work. There's always this vague dissatisfaction that something was left out.
Yeah.
You never know when the painting is finished. You never know when the poem is done, right?
That just explained a lot about me.
You don't know what you're doing.
I'll get back to that in a second. We have a caller on the line. Joe DeRosa. Are you there?
Joe.
Are you there? Joe?
Yeah.
There he is. Okay.
Hi, Joe.
You're on the line with George Carlin.
Oh, hey, Danny, George, what's up, guys? How you doing?
Same old stuff. How you doing?
I'm doing really well.
I'm good, too, by the way.
We're all right. So far, everybody here is all right.
Yeah. Good. George, I'm a comedian here in the city, and I wanted to call. I've been wanting to meet you for my entire career.
It's not happening.
You get smart asses here.
No. I've been wanting to meet you for my entire career and longer, and been just wanting to tell you that you've probably heard this a million times, but you're the reason, or complete reason, that I got into comedy. And the reason for that being is when I watched you as a kid, what attracted me to the idea of stand-up comedy was the expression of ideas and opinions versus the straight jokes. And, you've continued to do that. In my opinion, you and Bill Cosby are the only two examples we still have in the business of completely progressive and growing comedians that have been relevant. And
wait, Bill Cosby's relevant?
Of comedians that continue to transform and grow and progress through their career.
Right. The guys who are going somewhere. Yeah, I agree about Cosby. He's a monologist who has always added more stuff to his repertoire, and who doesn't repeat the old stuff. Because when people ask you that, they say, "Hey, how come you don't do that thing anymore? That thing there, it was good, remember that?"
Right.
And I say, well, if I was still doing that, the only way to do those old things is to have them in working shape. You have to, it's like playing basketball. If you take a year off because you have an injury, you have to get back in shape first, then you get back in basketball shape. And that's what those things are not in. I know them somewhere in the depths of my head, but I don't know them anymore. So I'd have to relearn them and redo them, and then you can't do current things. You can't go anywhere new. So they stay, they wither, they go, they're back there, and they're fine because they're on DVDs or CDs, and so you can prove you did them. But thank you. I appreciate when someone mentions the progression of things over the years.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the inspiration, and it really is just, has meant worlds to me.
Thank you.
In the tough times in this business, as you know.
Is Joe going to cry?
Yeah. As I go through horrible times, I can't even afford a bowl of soup. I have to split it with my fellow comics.
Danny, if there's like 2 seconds, I just want to ask a question.
Go ahead.
George, what do you do when, and this is a problem as a young comedian that I've run into a little bit, it's like, what do you do when you want to be the guy that keeps writing and keeps trying new things and keeps taking chances, but you also have to be cognizant of the fact that you need to keep getting paid, and you're not a celebrity, and you're not famous. So what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, I didn't face that because I came up in a time before the revolution of the 60s, before the culture significantly changed in this idea of questioning authority out loud, shaking your fist, which all happened late 60s, early 70s. I came up in a period before that when it was suit and tie, nice guy, people-pleasing time. And I had the ability to do those kind of things. I had things that were all media spoofs on radio, television, newscasts, soap operas, commercials, quiz shows, all of these things. And I did that. The only thing I can say is I wouldn't know what to do if I had the dilemma you're talking about. But I think in developing, your first obligation is to get the forum, to get the stage, to get to a place where the other thing can begin to be part of who you are as well. I don't think you can be one or the other. I think you have to learn to start as a person who knows how to please an audience, maybe not on their terms. You can still do it on your terms, and observe whatever stupid rules the club owner has. But within that framework, somehow you have to figure out a way to grow and gain confidence and to keep feeding things into the act. And then you can take a chance here and there of putting in the riskier, more dangerous ideas, and retreat back into the safe stuff. I mean, I'm just making this up because I haven't had to do it, but that's probably what I would do if I were faced with it, which I'm not familiar with.
And buy the club owner a sandwich. It always works.
Buy the club.
Buy the club.
Well,
all right,
thank you so much.
Keep kicking them in the nuts, Joe.
All right. You want to go to one more call and then we'll take a break?
Sure.
All right. Again, the number is 646-312-4720. We're here with the great George Carlin, opposed to the lousy one. I told people we had George Carlin on the show. They said, the comedian George Carlin or something? Some guy you met on the train.
I thought we were going to have a random person named George Carlin on the show.
Is this Carolyn in Iowa?
Yes.
Hi. You're on the air with George Carlin.
Hi, George.
Hi, Carolyn. How are you?
Oh, my goodness. I am such a big fan of yours,
Thank
and
you.
I'm hoping I'm not going to scream going, ah!
No, don't do that, Carolyn. We have laws. We have laws.
Oh,
Carrie, are you going to be okay?
That makes you
I'm doing great.
You weren't any clothes.
I'm doing really
in the
good.
tub right now.
I'm not screaming. That's a perk. That's the first thing. I'm not screaming right now.
So do you have a question or?
I thought long and hard about it. After Katie told me about that, you were gonna, or I could ask you a question. Oh gosh,
you didn't think that long.
I was like, okay, what's something I could ask George Carlin that won't come off stupid, like maybe in hindsight? So I don't.
He's not going to see.
Don't judge all this while you're living. Just live.
Okay. Oh gosh.
I'm going to cut you off soon here.
Carrie, you were my best friend our whole lives, but I really am going to have to hang up on you if you don't come on.
Okay. What do you think of the political arena today? With it being they're kind of like pushing the candidates this early, and
It's not that early anymore.
No, not anymore.
So far, your question stinks.
It's a terrible question.
I think it's all a lot of fun, to watch. It's kind of like a big circus to me. I don't take America seriously anymore. I gave that up. I don't take the human race seriously anymore. I give up on them. I think they've made horrible choices. Yeah. I think they've organized themselves poorly. I think we've done the same thing. I think we have the most broken political system that somehow still manages to work. The miracle is there is still this peaceful handoff of power from people who hate each other from one to the other, which is really unusual.
Hey,
it doesn't happen much. It doesn't. It doesn't happen much. So we have a great system that's horribly broken right from the fact that people have to raise all this money and make all these promises and begin to run for re-election immediately after getting in office. The electoral college is stupid. The primary system is stupid. Election day day should be the whole weekend. It should be Saturday and Sunday, 24 hours. You should be able to be registered just by having a driver's license. There's a lot of things they ought to do, but they won't do them, and that's why we're doomed.
I know, but it's nice to know that you agree.
Yeah, good.
George, based on all that info,
thank you, Carolyn.
Based on all that, don't you feel that you would make the next great president?
Of course not, because you'd have to make too many compromises. Dictator, maybe I would. Dictator's a different job.
Then don't worry, you'll be my vice president.
You're gonna run with Dave.
As long as you give me as much power as Cheney got, I'll be a happy dude.
I just want the salary. I don't.
You know, I had to convince him really hard to come in today. I said George Carlin's going to be here. He said I'm missing jogging class.
Listen, I'm a huge fan like everybody else, of course, but I am going to get kicked out of so many classes. I have so many absences. It's ridiculous.
And Chris told people he's going to a wake. He got out of his restaurant job.
That's nice. Did you say it was your mother? That's always good. My mother.
I had a wake 3 weeks ago that I didn't use the excuse for, so I figured I could just use it this time.
Just transfer the wake.
Okay, that's good. You can only use each parent once. Remember that.
Chris's boss thinks like 50 people have died in his family this morning.
Well, maybe they were shopping.
We're going to go
till you drop.
Quick musical and commercial break. We'll be right back with George Carlin in just a minute. Stay tuned. And we're back here. That was AC/DC's Highway to Hell. I'm going to skip the commercials for now. We'll do them later.
All right.
If they drop out, they drop out. We don't spend enough time together. You know, that's
right.
what it is.
You're right.
I have this opportunity.
Yeah, here we are.
I'll lose the commercial. Let's take another caller here on the line. This is Joe Conti from New Jersey. Are you there, Joe?
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, what do you say?
Hey, how are you, Mr. Carlin?
Pretty good, pretty good.
I was about 3 years doing comedy, and I met you backstage at the Westbury Music Fair at the time.
Uh-huh.
Me and a bunch of my friends. My one friend pestered you in email for months.
All right.
So you let us. He's annoying, but hey, I got to meet you, so that was cool.
Yeah. Good.
And I'll never forget the one thing you told us. You said, "Listen, guys, if you know you have good stuff, and you know it's good, and you know that it's smart." If the crowd doesn't dig it, just remember, it's always them. It's always them.
Right.
And I just thought, wow, one of the icons in comedy is blaming the audience, and I thought it was good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, if it worked on if you die on Saturday night with your stuff, but it worked great on Friday, and it worked great on Thursday, and it worked great last weekend. It's not you, it's not the stuff, it's them. And then once they're resistant, if you do happen to get the luck of the draw with an audience that's not just right, sometimes you react to that subconsciously, and you feed off it, and you don't do your best. But it's not the material; it's just the performance that night, because the performance happens between you and them, so they share equal responsibility. I mean, that's the way I've always looked at it. I'd die on a Saturday night down to Greenwich Village at the Cafe Au Go-Go, and I'd say, well, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I remember the night before, and I'd say, man, everything worked great. Yeah. And I would just let the two cancel out and forget it and go on and do a set on Sunday night.
So you don't walk around upset if you have a bad set.
No,
I heard Larry David say, like, if he has a bad set, he's in a bad mood until he has a good set.
Yeah, well, there are other things in his life that are similar to that. I don't live much beyond. I live in the always. People say you should live in the now. People should live in the present time. I live in the always. There's had some good times there before, but wait till you see what's coming next. And here I am today, and I'll see you later. How's everything?
Right.
That's all there is to it. There's no sense in dwelling on any one part of it and let it eat you up.
All right. Is that it, Joe?
I got one other question for Mr. Carlin. Have you found that your humor and what makes you laugh has changed dramatically from maybe 10, 15, even 20 years ago?
No, I don't think so, because I still like a lot of the people who are just long-term historical figures in comedy. The Marx Brothers films, W.C. Fields, all of Woody Allen's things in every medium. Same with Steve Martin in every medium. And there are comedians from the 50s that, if I listen to selected things, certain pieces of material, 50s and 60s, that I still like. So, no, I don't think my tastes have changed. They may have sharpened a bit, but I have no gauge for that. I have really no way to answer that accurately. I'm just guessing that no, I haven't noticed a change.
Well, thanks a lot. It was great talking to you, and good luck, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for the kind words. Bye-bye.
Okay, that was Joe Conti.
Got 2 Italian guys in a row.
Yeah, a lot of Joes. You have a lot of Joes out there.
Joe this, Joe that, Joe here and there.
You were in a terrific film with Ben Stiller.
Yeah, working trash.
Working trash.
Yeah, goofy movie.
Going to be a sequel?
It's a long time in the works.
You do some weird movie picks. I'm going to say that's a euphemism.
Well, I get some weird movie offers, I guess, But I'm lucky that I was in 2 movies that more or less qualify kind of as cult movies.
Right.
Car Wash
and Bill and Ted.
And Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
Especially the second one. That was really weird because that was terrible.
I thought your best role ever was you as the priest in Dogma.
Yeah, Dogma. I love that.
I saw it again a week ago. It was on the screen. I saw the people on the train. I said, "Oh, good, my scene's coming up."
Yeah.
I watched until my scene, then I went to something else. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. After
watching you rip on religion for so long, to see you in that role, you could tell why Kevin Smith cast you in it too. It was just it was
completely by chance.
And then he wrote Jersey Girl with me in mind for his father, who was more or less the surrogate character.
Any new movies in the works?
No, you know what? That's a big waste of time. First of all, I've often said this: if Sean Penn, Al Pacino, and Jack Nicholson called me all at the same time on a conference call and said, "We want you to play the bartender in a movie we're doing. You get to strangle 6 children at the end." That would be a role I could do. But I don't really like, you know what? It's a waste of time for me because I don't have a movie career. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be another movie part. And you waste all this time waiting for them to set up shots, and they throw you around on the schedule. They'd say, "Well, we're going to start shooting in 3 weeks."
Right.
And I've got stuff scheduled out 3-4 months ahead.
Yeah.
Stuff that we invest in because we pay for our own advertising and our own tickets and stuff. So they just screw up your life too much. I'm not going to do it unless it's really something that I couldn't walk away from.
I've got an idea for a movie for you.
All right.
It's a Santa Claus film.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you're a little thin for it.
Yeah.
But you go around and you tell everybody that Jesus doesn't exist. And that neither do you.
Okay.
What do you think?
Oh, you tell me. Let me see the rest of the outline.
There's no more of it. That's it. That's the whole film.
This was the treatment right
it's
here.
It's completely improv, by the way.
You know what?
I have a little camcorder over there. We can shoot it.
Jack Nicholson. Perfect. Perfect.
It's you and Tim Allen dueling Santa Claus.
Oh, yeah. Santa. Yes.
Would you get into any movie roles if you could have your choice or what if somebody approached you with a production house, a studio, and gave you the money and said they would produce your script?
No.
Something about if you could nothing.
No, you know why? It's a collaborative art. Too many other people looking over your shoulder.
What if you directed?
It's still the studio, the distributor, the investor, the producers, everybody is going to get involved. The actor's going to say, my character wouldn't say that. What I want to do is what I do. I work for myself. I write, I conceive it, I write it, I perform. Bing, bang, boom. I'm a package. I just show up with my mouth and I'm there. Or I send in a book,
And you do it brilliantly.
And that's all I want to do. I'm a soloist. I'm really not a team player. I really don't even like to even be around people. This is very unusual.
Yeah. Well, we're not real people.
No, it's true.
How much would you have to pay to do a role that you would absolutely hate? Because
Dave's got a few bucks.
Yeah,
Dave always wants to know what he can buy people for.
No, it's too hypothetical for me.
We just get weirder and weirder. What if you and Woody Allen do an underwater film together?
Yeah, well, he plays a shark.
Yeah, no, leave me out.
All right, George Carlin, the legendary comedian for a good reason. Go out there and go to George's.
King Arthur was a legend. King Arthur was a legend.
But he wasn't that funny.
I've just been around a long time.
Yeah. Well, you're funnier than King Arthur, too.
Yeah, true.
And you don't have a Lancelot.
I don't have a sword.
Yeah, you have a microphone.
It's still in the stone.
Go on George Carlin's website, which is georgecarlin.com, and get the Career Retrospective DVD box set, which just came out. MPI Home Video released it on, I believe,
about a month
September 25th, very recently.
Yeah.
And that's got all your specials in it on DVD.
It's got 12 of them in there, yep.
12 out of 13, right?
Yeah, the 13th one had too many other things, a lot of clips in it, too many clearances to make. We didn't want to bother with them.
Is there going to be another one after this special?
After this one in March?
After this special in March, will you?
Probably I'll want to do 15, because by then I'll be 75. 15 HBO, 75 years old. I have to write a book before, though. I got a book I want to do before that called Circling the Drain.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it.
Me too.
George, thank you so much for being on the show.
Sure, thank you guys.
It's
Thanks,
an honor.
Everybody.
I hope you come back sometime, and I'll tell I hope I have the opportunity to tell people again. Yeah, he's still not dead. He's coming back again.
I'll be back.
I hope you wear a better shirt next time. I was very unhappy with the shirt. Pat Cooper came in. He had a nice shirt. It was ironed, and
he probably stole it.
George Carlin. We'll be right back. Hello, George?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you? It's Danny Lobel.
Yeah, Danny, I'm doing all right.
And it's an honor to be talking to you.
Thank you.
George, you've been doing comedy forever, and you're a legend and respected by every comedian. Now, I have a lot of questions for you. You've done 13 specials. How did you start that relationship with HBO?
Here's the deal. Back in 1977... that's the year I did my first HBO special. I did another one the following year. My career had, gone into overdrive in 1972 with the release of the first Little David album. And that was FM and AM, and then came Class Clown, Occupation Fool, Toledo Window Box. Those 4 went gold. Then there were 2 more that... weren't quite gold albums, but they're pretty good and everything, but they didn't quite sell at that level. So
right.
I was not the hot new guy anymore, and the world was changing. The end of the hippie era, free love, call it whatever you want, sexual revolution, youth movement, counterculture, all that shit that had just faded, and disco had taken over the popular culture. And so life was changing in the culture, and I had to run out of my initial burst of energy creatively. Mm-hmm. So I kind of drifted a little bit creatively within myself for a while, and I did Carson shows a lot. I did so far I've done about 135 or something Tonight shows. But the thing is this: HBO. The albums, the record albums, gave me a mass market, a way to reach a mass market, a nationwide market, whereas the concerts were very limited. You'd have 3,000 people, 4,000, and they would all talk to each other, but it's not like the same thing. So the albums were my way of reaching the mass, and then when that began to fade, HBO came along, and although they didn't have the subscribership that they have now, they had a lot of people, and I was able to build and continue to my relationship with the mass audience through HBO.
Right.
So that's where it came in, right when it was needed.
Now, your most recent special that you did, Life is Worth Losing, was a little bit grimmer than any of the other specials we've seen from you.
Well, yeah, I like. Well, one of my favorite things to do is to find out where people's sensitive areas are. Find out the hot spots, or the hot buttons, or whatever you want to call them. I like talking about things that make people uneasy, because it's fun to get them kind of tensed up a little, and wondering where you're going to go with this, because they know it's a sensitive topic, and then to show them how it's okay.
Right.
To talk about it, to laugh about it, to think about it even. Mm-hmm. So what I do is, just by my example of the material, is to kind of take them on a guided tour, in this particular show more than the others, on a guided tour of the danger zones,
Right.
They're their own personal cultural danger zones, which are mostly artificially instituted in them anyway by the culture, the religion and the government and the expected kind of behaviors we have. So I like breaking down all those walls. And as you know, even before this show, I've done that on a different kind of different other subjects.
But is there ever a time when you've done a bit and you felt maybe I've gone a little too far with this? I don't know if they're understanding me. I don't know if they're feeling me.
Well, you know what? I don't really care if they understand me or feel me. I do this for myself.
Right.
This is for me, And if I get people to come along with me, that's a big bonus. And I can't exist without them, ultimately, in the long term, coming along with me. But now that I'm fully established in a long-term way,
right,
I don't have to worry about maybe alienating some people, because as many as I might alienate at this point, I would pick up that same number of new people,
right,
because that's just the way it works. And HBO, one of the values of HBO is that it cuts through all of the lines of age, education, race, income, neighborhood. All of these demographic things that separate us are non-existent when it comes to the HBO audience.
Right.
And that is why the concert audiences that you see, that I see at my shows or anyone else would see, range from 15 years of age to people in their 50s and 60s.
Right.
And it's always been that way. I've always picked up more people. People have said to me, well, how's that audience? Have they stayed with you? And I say, I don't know. It doesn't bother. I don't care. I just, what I do, whoever's interested can come along, and that's fine. And I have a thing that I say sometimes when I'm talking to an audience like in Las Vegas, where they're notoriously crappy audiences.
Right.
And you do feel like you're talking to the wall some of the time, because they're just too stupid or too frightened or whatever it is.
Right.
And I often say to them, I say, listen, I don't give a shit if you like this stuff or not, because frankly, the audience doesn't figure into my plans. And I say this, which always gets a nice laugh. Right. I look at it this way. You're here for me, I'm here for me, and no one's here for you. And that just breaks down some of that tension, you know.
Your act has evolved so much over the years. I've watched some of your really early stuff,
right,
and stuff you did in the '60s, the Hippy Dippy Weatherman. I love that bit. Do you think over the years you've gotten angrier, or is it just you've always felt the same way, but you've just over the years been able to come out with it more?
Well, there's a couple of things I got to remember in giving you this answer, and it's kind of long. There's a couple of layers here. Remind me to come back to the word anger, okay? And then the word artist. There's a lot of things. First of all, I'm very out of step with everything. I've never felt like I belonged to anything. The church, I guess as a young kid, a little kid, I had some of that. I guess I had a little bit of I'm an American stuff when I was a little kid and still naive. But for the most of my adult life and the memory I have, I've never really felt a part of this country or a part of this, my religion that was given to me, or even of my species. I don't identify with my species. Abraham Maslow said, the truly realized man does not identify with the local group. And I do not identify with the local group, which is my fellow man or my neighborhood or my profession. I don't hang out with comedians. I'm not a spokesman for comedy or anything. I'm just kind of do my thing, and I'm friendly. I'm a friendly person. From the anger standpoint, so being out of step like that has made me at odds with everything there is pretty much out there in the culture, whether it's the serious culture or the pop culture. So we'll put that up as a starter that I don't agree. I do not conform. I do not agree. Then add the fact that artists are on a journey usually. I mean, I know that I'm an entertainer, and it's a lesser place than artist. And I know that I'm a stand-up comic, and that's considered kind of a low rung on the totem pole. I don't mind any of those things. I'm a stand-up comic, and I'm an entertainer. But some of us are also artists. There are entertainers only. There are artist entertainers. And I think an artist is moving and growing and in pursuit of something that he really doesn't understand or know. You can't put your finger on it. All artists, composers, choreographers, dancers. Dancers are interpretive artists usually, but purely creative, the writer, the composer. Those people have something that propels them, and they're never satisfied. So that, I think, is alive in me and has pushed me forward to find more things in myself to say about what I see and hear around me. The third thing to remember is I have never really had much anger in my personal life. I don't have a temper. I can get irritated like anyone else. I can get frustrated like anyone else. But I don't live with anger. Anyone who's been around me for any appreciable length of time probably has never seen me lose my temper or lash out at anyone. You can get into arguments at home, and that's a little bit different. You know, you're at close quarters with a mate, with a wife or a husband or something, and you're going to have things that you have to express. But generally speaking, I am pretty mellow and at ease with everyone. And anyone met me on the street would tell you I'm accessible, I'm friendly, I always have a good word and a smile, and I ask what your name is and all that shit. Mm-hmm. So there's no anger here. The thing they see on stage that seems angry is my irritation, my dissatisfaction, my disenchantment with all the shit that these two entities have shown me. These two entities are the species that I belong to and the culture that I belong to. I think each of them have squandered great gifts that were given to them. The species was given the gift of communication and the ability to cooperate and compete in some sort of balance that would make the species move forward, thrive. Mm-hmm. Well, competition and cooperation have gotten out of balance. We don't cooperate as well anymore. We mostly compete. And I think we've let God and the cash register get in the way of everything that's important. The same thing is true of this culture here. We were given these great freedoms and this great philosophy and theory of self-government and democracy, and we turned it all over to the money traders and the high priests. People are just driven by these religious superstitions, by the pursuit of goods, the pursuit of money, and therefore power, and it's just completely out of balance. It's life out of balance, as the Hopi Indians would say. Right. And that is what gets me a little irritated about what happened. I feel betrayed by my culture, betrayed by my species. So that reads as anger on a stage because you have to heighten everything on a stage for theatrical purposes anyway. So it seems like I'm an angry guy.
Right.
That's my answer.
Wow, thanks. Now, when I met you with Jackie Mason,
yeah,
I heard you say to him that you feel he's one of the greatest three comics of all time.
Yeah.
Who are the other two?
Well, one time when I saw him years ago on the street, and he had not started his Broadway phase yet. In other words, the most important part of his career hadn't even really started yet. I had known him from his first surge, mm-hmm. and his television days, and then when he went into a little bit of an eclipse, I would follow him. I saw him at a club in Santa Monica and stuff, and I always told him, I always said to him that. I always said, you're one of my top 5 or one of my top 3 or something like that. And I don't know who the others are. I just know there's a very small group that I think are the best. And so after telling him for years that, you're one of my top 3, he said, let me ask you a question. He says, who are these other people? Can you give me the names of these other people, please? So I don't know who they are. Obviously, I love Lenny Bruce and Richard Pryor, what they did.
Right.
But Jackie Mason is just very special. And I don't know. I guess, if I had a half an hour and a pencil and a paper, I could sit and come up with a nice list of 10 people. I think Woody Allen's brain is great. I could come up with a list of 10 people who I thought were just in my book, I would go back and listen to over and over. Red Fox is one of them. Right. There's just maybe 10 or 15 of them. And then the list tends to want to get a little bigger. A guy like Louis Black comes along, mm-hmm. and Mitch Hedberg, who's gone now, but who had such a good head. I like Stephen Wright, Mm-hmm. But when it comes to year in, year out, more and more, and stuff that you can count on, Jackie Mason is one of those kind of guys.
Right.
And every time I see him in person, I ask him to do Ed Sullivan, and man, when he does Frank Sinatra, it's so fucking. He's so physical that he doesn't need to be. He's an accomplished verbal comic. His ideas are great. His politics are not all the same politics I have, but he expresses them beautifully, and he finds the truth in it. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, he can do physical things. And he works an audience too.
Right.
Mister, are you listening? Tell the truth, Mister. Are you a homosexual? I just always loved that shit when he just stops the show. And I know what he's doing. He's vamping.
Right.
And that's okay.
People don't even know to the extent that he can do it. Like, he can do impressions of guys you'd never imagine. I can name almost any old-time stand-up comic to him.
I'll bet you.
He could do a perfect impression of them.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a story about Jackie Mason and me. When I was with my partner, Burns and Carlin, we were a team, Burns and Carlin.
Right.
In our first year, we only spent 2 years together, 1960 to, from the middle of 60 to the middle of 62. And one of the things we did when we were in the New York area was to work a club date, a one-night club date, for a dinner for a special kind of audience, Right. That's what they call, I don't know if they still call them club dates. Mm-hmm. A one-nighter. Yeah, we got $50 for this thing at the St. George Hotel in Brooklyn. And the group was the Brooklyn Gas Merchants. And Jackie Mason was on ahead of us.
Right.
And he was somewhat beginning to be known,
Mm-hmm.
but he had nowhere near, I think, even reached his first peak. And one of the things that Burns and Carlin did in our act, I imitated, Jack and I did Huntley and Brinkley and Nixon and Kennedy.
Yeah.
And he did Huntley interviewing me as Kennedy. But Jackie Mason, we were standing behind the curtain, and we liked Jackie, and he was on before us, and we're listening. He stayed on a long time, naturally, which is murder. It just kills you. Mm-hmm. He was the accomplished performer. We were not. Right. We did little, cute little skits. And he launched into his Kennedy to close with. Mm-hmm. And it was, perfect, and the lines were funny and everything. So we came on, and we were a big anticlimax, to say the least. And that was my first taste of Jackie, and it involved one of his great impressions, in this case, Kennedy.
I remember you used to do a lot of impressions in your act when you were starting out. I saw an old clip of you on the Mike Douglas show. Yeah. When John Lennon and Yoko Ono were co-hosting.
Yeah. And one of the things I did in order to break the ice in a nightclub when I'd be working was to open, because I knew that nobody knew me, or maybe one person had seen me on TV and says, "Oh, I know that guy," but nobody knew me. I would say, when you're a new comedian, you have to figure out what style of comedian you want to be. And I said, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different kind of people. I said, first of all, there's the old-timers like Jackie Leonard, and I would do about 3 or 4 jokes of Jackie Leonard type things. Mm-hmm. Then I would say, and then there are the newer people like Mort Saul, and I did this great Mort Saul. And I did a good Shelley Berman, and I did a good Lenny Bruce. So those, not everyone knew who Lenny Bruce was, of course, but in those kind of clubs, a lot of people did.
What year was it?
This was 1960, let's start in April 62 through about 65.
And you also started out doing radio.
Yeah.
And what I found is that stand-up and radio, for me, really worked together. Like, I'd come up with these great ideas on the air, and then I'd say, hey, let me go back to that and work on it as a bit.
Yeah, good.
And is that, did you get a lot of your stand-up through radio?
Well, when I was a little kid, I decided I'd be a disc jockey first and a comedian second, and then become an actor like Danny Kaye, a comic actor. So that was my plan when I was 11 years old. So for me, it was being a disc jockey. And I became a DJ when I was about 18. Mm-hmm. And that lasted 4 years after, and then I met Jack Burns, and we started into comedy. So it didn't quite work the way I planned it, although basically it did. It didn't work specifically. The radio was a stepping stone, a way of getting confident at a young age, perfecting a kind of a verbal style, just to hear myself speaking and be sure-footed on my feet, verbally, and to be able to think quickly. And I had a little bit of chance to be a personality on the air. It wasn't a formula radio station. But Not really. I was keeping a small file of ideas even then, but I wasn't working toward being a comedian at that time. I was trying to get into the largest radio market I could. I wanted to be a big-time DJ so that it would set me up to become a comedian. I don't know. I was a kid when I was 11 when I planned all this. So I stayed with the simplistic plan longer than I needed to, or I tried to stay with it longer than I needed to because events changed. And I found out I couldn't really act. I didn't really care for it. I wasn't good at it. I was scared shitless. I didn't have any style, any technique, or any kind of training. And the other thing was coming easy to me, the comedy.
Right.
So I found out I was really, stage 2 was really where I belonged as a comedian.
Right. Well, George, one more question.
All right.
What advice would you give to comedians who are working today to try and become even a part as successful as you?
Well, the only way is you have to be true to yourself, and you have to remember that they're there for you. You're not there for them. It really depends on what level of recognition and development you're at. If you're really, really new, the main thing is to find an audience as often as you can. Mm-hmm. Keep doing it, because you have to learn to play the trumpet before anybody's going to put you in the band. And the only way to learn to play the trumpet is practicing. And the only way you can practice comedy is in front of an audience. Mm-hmm. So you have to get out and just fail. And I always remembered one thing. When I was in my first year or two as a single, and I would have a crappy night and have to ride all the way home on the subway from Greenwich Village to my home uptown, mm-hmm. I would console myself by saying, well, yeah, but Friday night they loved it. Friday night was great. So what do these people know? Always remember, the audience is always wrong. That's what I believe. The audience is always wrong when they don't like you, because you have all those other nights when it worked.
Right.
So you have to count on that.
Right.
Go with the good.
Thank you so much, George. It's really been an honor talking to you.
It's my pleasure.
If you're in New York, let me know.
I will. I have this number I have is not your number, right, but I have your 516 number.
Right.
Okay, I'll call you.
Thanks so much, George.
Okay, man.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Hey, we're back here on the show, and I'm very sorry to disappoint people. I know I said we were going to go to the White Trash Update, but George Carlin is here.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's the same thing.
I've really disappointed the listeners.
I hope not. Anyway, we'll get to the White Trash Update later.
We do a White Trash Update because Kate comes from a white trash family.
Do you?
Yeah, in case anyone's curious, my brother is still a hooker.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
Where did they originate?
Near Tampa, Florida.
And what kind of a thing?
In what kind of a thing? What kind of a swamp did they come from, right?
I just wondered if it was trailer trash.
Yeah, it's like a double wide.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Good, a lot of room to move around.
Her brother also doesn't have teeth, and he's a hooker, too.
That's the first requirement. Yes, that's good for a hooker.
And her sister's a stripper.
Coming.
They are.
So we check up on what they do every week.
Another fine family.
Yeah. Thank you for coming and doing the show.
Sure.
I can't believe you're here, first of all.
I can't either.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad to. I'm happy to. I wanted to do the thing I promised you I would do.
Thank you.
So this is nice. I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
It's a pleasure to have you. You're working on your new HBO special, right?
Well, I'm doing it March 1st. It's called It's Bad For You. And it's live from Santa Rosa, California. It'll be the 14th one I've done since 77, 30 years of doing them. So I'm very happy with it. It's probably the best one yet. I really think the stuff it's got the most cohesive feel. It's got a kind of an overall theme without being stated that's there.
Right.
And I like that. So I'm very happy about it.
What kind of things does this one cover?
Well, BS in America.
Okay, that's a popular theme.
The fact that from childhood through death, and all along the way, you're just surrounded by BS of all kinds, whether it's the government, civilization, that are a threat, that are perceived as a threat to this civilization. So a lot of the pieces are in place, and it's inevitable anyway, because this is a decadent place. I mean, you can now buy well, for instance, there are over 200 different forms of cat food stand by. There are like 400 different choices in mustards alone.
I have all of them.
I'm sure you do. But it's just, it's really a very trivial culture, and it deserves to die.
So who do you think?
It really does. For the evil we've done, the exploitation and theft of cultures, the theft of natural resources, the exploitation of black and brown people for centuries, just as the English did. They called it white man's burden. We called it manifest destiny. We stole this country. We wiped out 500 Indian cultures and religions in the process,
right.
And we then stole the remaining part from Mexico. We just took it. And so it's ours. Yeah, it's really a goofy place.
Yeah, but I think that all the other countries are so crappy that we still win.
I still would rather be here than anywhere else.
Exactly.
That's
other cultures, if you die, you go in other religions, you get closer to God, whatever. Yeah. If you die in Islam, you get 72 chicks. That's what it is. You get 72 virgins.
I've seen that disputed by Islamic scholars.
Right.
A lot of them don't agree with that.
Some say 40.
Some say the whole thing's just made up by the West.
Which I know you hate religion.
Well, hate is a really tough word because you have to actively live hate. And I don't hate anything, but I have a strong distaste. Excuse me while I fish out a Kleenex here.
Sure.
I have a strong distaste for what man has done to himself, Yulpukin, or religion stroking you big time, or big business stroking you, or the strokes of ordinary things we repeat all the time without thinking how full of crap they are.
Right.
And but the theme is it's bad for you, because the longer thing I say a few times in the show to reestablish the theme, I say it's all BS, folks. It's all BS, and it's bad for you, because it is, But it's true of any culture. There are a lot of things that aren't genuine, that are just part of the everyday belief system and part of what we accept and don't look at and don't question and don't examine and don't challenge. Right. And that's one of the problems, is that we don't challenge things in this country. No one is taught to question authority anymore.
I heard you talking about how you feel this country's going to fall, and I think you have a good point, because I always think about like the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire, the Byzantines. Yeah. They all thought they were the greatest, and they all went down.
They all overextend. They all overextend geographically. They all wind up employing mercenaries. If you heard that one lately, right? Yeah. Iraq. And there are a number of other factors which don't come to mind now, because I haven't briefed myself on that. I read a little about that and I file it somewhere, and it's not there when I need it. So I often look things up more recently to be more conversant with them. But there are at least 6 or 7 significant parallels between any empire, the Dutch, the Spanish Empire, the British Empire. They all overextended themselves.
I think we're following that pattern.
I think it's inevitable. And the other thing was that the barbarians are at the gate. We refer to the Muslim fascist, so-called fascists, as these are the current people who really do not come from a similar type of
George Carlin. Wow. So he played a tape of yours. That's the first time I ever heard you.
Wow.
And he played your bit about euphemism. Don't thank me. He played it. Okay. I just listened.
Well, what's the teacher's name?
I forgot.
Thanks, Steve.
But I remembered you.
I wound up doing, like the last book that came out, I wound up doing about 60 pages on them, spread throughout the book, But
When Will Jesus Bring the Pork Chops?
Yeah, When Will Jesus Bring the Pork Chops, right. So anyway, euphemisms are all part of the lies that we live, ways of avoiding the truth, ways of blunting reality and not living with it, not being in it. I understand the urge to do it. I understand the impulse, but things get overdone. Any good idea, any bad idea, we overdo it. Overdo everything.
Every time I interview you, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I just want to say every time I interview you, it's great, because everybody calls me up. They say, you're interviewing George Carlin? That's great. You better make it a good interview, because this could be the last opportunity you have. He's so old.
Yeah. I'm 70.
Yeah.
I'm 70, and I'm from a healthy line. My father died young with heart disease, which I inherited, but I inherited good medical care and its advances in science and good medicine, good care, and a little bit of wisdom about how to live some years back. So that's the only only part of me that's ever broken down. I've never had troubles with my health. I've had heart disease, and I've had troubles from it and problems with it. But I now know how to manage it very well, and you can still, there are things that still can happen, but generally speaking, my health is good.
So what are there things you do to keep yourself, because you're one of the few comics that's had the longevity in your career, and so many others just haven't made it this far.
Well, I found out, I used to describe myself in interviews when I began. I used to say, well, I'm a comedian who writes his own material, because I was always proud, pardon the capital M man, but I use the language I was born into. Today's kids can call these things whatever they want, but it's capital M man. We've always called humankind in the past. So the way we've given over ourselves to this invisible man in the sky, who has a list of things he doesn't want us to do. It's an absurdity. It's primitive. It's on a par with worshiping rocks and the sun, and so it's absolutely primitive.
There's just so many people that die and kill in the name of religion.
What about the modern religious people who say, but we can still say that God is science, that kind of whole argument thing, Well,
there are people who say, well, there's an organizing intelligence maybe in the universe, some sort of an organizing intelligence. Now, I used to call myself an atheist until I found out one or the other, that's kind of a belief too. And I don't really like to be stuck with a belief. So in the official listing of titles, I would probably fall under agnostic, because I have no way of knowing the answer to any of these things. But I'm sure it's not a judgmental male figure who throws lightning bolts and puts you in a place of fire.
So it's not
and
Zeus.
Punishes you and keeps track of kids who are 9 years old, whether they're touching themselves or not. It's just an absurdity on its face.
That's Santa Claus, actually.
Santa does the touching, I see. Okay. Excuse me a second. I have what's called vasomotor rhinitis. Isn't that a nice name for a runny nose?
Yeah.
The doctor said basically your nose runs because it wants to, George.
It's a beautiful euphemism.
It's a better reason for blowing my nose than I used to have, and it's much less expensive.
When I learned about euphemisms in high school, my English teacher at the time said nobody can explain euphemisms better than George